Hey everybody, it's your old pal Ken, aka Sleaze Grinder. I wanted to accomplish a couple of things today. Number one, I just wanted to do a little introduction, introduce myself to the vinyl community officially, and I also want to talk about some new arrivals. So I'll get to that in a moment. But first, I thought I'd just tell you a little bit about who I am and what my project is, which is the Heavy Leather Record Club, which is a new podcast. Link below. I'll talk about that in a moment. But I've been writing about rock and roll for close to 25 years now. I mean, professionally, or fanzines when I was in my teen years. But I don't know, around 2000 or so, I started writing for local papers here in Boston. I mean, I live in Salem, but Boston in the larger area. Weekly Dig and Boston Phoenix were the two big papers in town at the time, and The Noise is the big music magazine. And then after that, I kind of graduated to more national magazines and then international magazines. And for the past, I don't know, 22, 23 years, I've been writing for Classic Rock magazine out of the UK. You might have seen my sleaze column somewhere in there over the years. So primarily, I've worked as a writer. Now, I've also, in the past 15 years or so, I've done a lot of podcasting. I had a pretty popular show called the Movies About Girls show way back in the mid-2000s. A lot of the people on the Heavy Leather Record Club podcast were also part of that cast, so it's really fun to reunite with them. And in the past 10 years or so, I've also done a lot of TV and radio hosting. Had a TV show locally here in town called the Heavy Leather Topless Dance Party, which was a live rock and roll dance party with live bands and burlesque and all kinds of craziness. It's on YouTube if you want to check them out. We did, I don't know, 170 or so episodes of that. And, we also carried over and did the Heavy Leather Horror Show, which is very similarly themed for a while as well. And the horror show, if you're interested in horror movies, we also do that as a podcast. So right now, we're mostly concentrating on the Heavy Leather Record Club podcast and trying to grow this YouTube channel as well. So that's a little bit about me. Hopefully, as time goes on, you will also meet the other members of the crew here. And so that's basically it. I've been a big fan. I discovered the vinyl community like a lot of people did around the time of the quarantine, and I really enjoy it. I love watching people show off their collections and make all these great recommendations. I love to see all these obscure records that people have. I really love it. I think that maybe I have something to add to it, so that's what I'm going to be hoping to do as time rolls on. So obviously, like everybody else, you can like, you can subscribe, you can comment. Appreciate all that. So I'm going to talk to you about some new arrivals. I got a bunch of new arrivals, so I'll probably do this in a few different chunks of videos. So I don't want to keep things going for too long. All right, so these first couple. So my wife and I, usually on Sundays when we're out doing errands or going somewhere and driving around on the Sirius channels, the 70s on 7 channel, on the weekends they play Casey Kasem's Top 40 Countdown. Casey Kasem was, if you don't know, was a very popular DJ in the 70s, and he would do every weekend he would do his top 40. So whatever corresponding week it is, they will do a different year. So this year it would be June whatever, 1974, 1971, or whatever it is. And most of these songs, we grew up on. Sometimes, we hear ones that kind of slip through and it kind of, blows our minds. And then we kind of have to pursue it. So that's what we did for these first couple of new arrivals. So this first one, been hearing this song since I was a kid, and I always thought it was Elvis until quite recently when I realized it wasn't Elvis. The name of the band, here we go, I don't think there's much glare today, luckily, it's overcast. The name of the band is Hamilton, Joe Frank, and Reynolds. I believe this record is from 1970 or 1971, and they were a West Coast band. Obviously, 3 guys with 3 names. It's very difficult to remember. I mean, I just told you what the name of the band was, and you still don't remember, right? And I think that was probably one of the problems why this band couldn't gain much traction. But Anyway, so they have this song. It's called Don't Pull Your Love. It's the first song on the B-side. And it's a fantastic song, and it really does sound like 70s Elvis. It's great. So, you know, we heard it, and I was like, Stace, my wife, I was like, Stace, we got to get this record. Please go on. We're driving. I just go on Discogs, get a decent copy of it. So we did get a decent copy of it. It's a little rough around the edges, but it plays nice. Yeah, and it's a major disappointment, it turns out. Don't Pull Your Love is great. I'm glad I have it on vinyl to listen to whenever I want. But most of the record is soft rock. There's a song, Going Down, which is the very first song on the album, which is pretty good. But the rest is just very, very AOR, very soft rock. Yeah, not that great. But still, you know, I don't know how much we paid for it. Probably not that much, about $15 or something. It's almost still worth it to have Don't Pull Your Love on vinyl, although you could probably get 45 pretty cheap. Next one, same kind of situation. And this song was not known to me or my wife when we were kids. I don't know, slipped through the cracks. But every time I hear it, it's so like haunting and beautiful and moving. You know, and then we find out who it is, and it's really very, very crazy. The 70s, the charts in the 70s were just so all over the place. It was wide open. It was, you know, anybody's game. And that's why Sister Janet Mead ended up on the charts with her rendition of the Lord's Prayer. Now, mind you, I'm not a religious person, and this is a religious record, but it's a fantastic record. Sister Janet Mead was a Australian, she just died like, I don't know, a few months ago. But she was an Australian nun, and she taught music. You know, that was her gig. And I don't know, she got sort of discovered at some point, and they were like, you gotta make a record. And then she did. There she is right there on the back. I don't know if you can see her. Sister Janet, good old Sister Janet. And then she made this record, and it's all her stuff is, you know, Lamb of God, He is King. Father, I put my life in your hands. It's all religious stuff, but the arrangements are really groovy and lightly psychedelic in places, and definitely funky, and like I said, really haunting and beautiful. At the very least, if you haven't heard it, check out her rendition of the Lord's Prayer. It's available on YouTube or whatever streaming services. Really, really good. This is a Canadian pressing that I got. I don't know, I think of like $15 or so. I definitely left field for me, but I really, really like this record a lot. I think you might like it too. So check it out. This next couple are a couple of newer metal albums. I think at this point in time, heavy metal is better than it's ever been. It's exploded in all these different directions. And you know, what a lot of bands were doing, what they call, you know, traditional. And for a while it seemed like they're just aping whatever was happening in the 80s. And while they're still doing that, it's kind of come around to become its own thing. You hear a lot about the new wave of traditional heavy metal now, right? Which means the whole new wave of bands playing the template from the 80s, but putting their own spin on it. And a lot of the music that's coming out of it is just fantastic. So I want to tell you about one of those bands, which is Midas, who are on tour now. So perhaps in a town near you. They're from Detroit, and I believe this is their first full-length album, and it is a total jammer. You can tell by the Flying V in Space on the cover what you're going to get, and that's exactly what you're going to get. You got a bass player biting chains on the back. You get songs with chains in the title and Hell in the title. Hell Has Frozen Over and Hellfire are both on here. Slaves Tonight is the opener. That's the killer right there. You know, if you like chugging, fast-paced, melodic guitar mayhem, Midas is going to do the job. So check them out. Got that one from the band on Bandcamp. It wasn't too bad. $25, something like that. This other band. Now, I paid $40 for their record. Don't even care, because they are one of the greatest metal bands in operation right now. I wrote about these guys in Classic Rock in my sleeves column. I think I gave them a 9 out of 10 because I'm really stoked on this band. They're from, I believe they're from Indiana. Somebody please tell me if I'm wrong about that. Same place as Wraith, who are my current favorite modern heavy metal band. But this is Aarakocra. Midwestern Steel is the name of the record. It's their first. And it is just amazing. What I said in Classic Rock, I think holds true, is basically if you took Warrior Soul, infamous late 80s, early 90s sleaze metal band Warrior Soul, and you kind of grafted them to a black metal band, but like a rockin' black metal band like Watain or somebody, you'd get Aarakocra. It's blackened sleaze metal, and it is amazing. It is so gonzo, full on, guns blazing, just killer heavy metal. Nailed to the Thieves' Cross, Wrath of the Wraith, Treacherous Waters of the Soul Divide. All of it is just phenomenal. And I hope that this band breaks big, plays, big shows. We all get to go, headbang, rock out, because they deserve it. This album is phenomenal. Aarakocra, everybody. Midwestern Steel. Now, these next two records I never thought I would own on vinyl. So one of them is a recent reissue, one of them is an original, but both came from the CD era. So, didn't think I'd ever own the records. But so let's talk about this one. Going back again, kind of late 80s to the mid 90s, there was a sound bubbling up. Both of these bands were involved, and it was basically sleazy disco metal, right? White Zombie were doing it, Sisters of Mercy were doing it, Zodiac Mind Warp and the Love Reaction were doing it. It was happening, You get a little danceable beat, you get sleazy, sinister guitars, you get some kind of man beast or woman beast out front. Everything's sexual, everything's gross, everything's murderous, and I loved it. I ate it all up. And one of the greatest bands of that micro genre were Foreskin 500 from New York. Guy named Diggy Diamond was the frontman of the band. And they released 3 records total. One of them was the one, right, that was going to propel them forward. And they had a great music video for one of the songs. And they had a great image. They they did kind of like a little bit of Merciful Fate, Alice Cooper kind of thing. And I remember I saw them during this tour, which is probably, I think, 93, 94, something like that. And they had like, it's like a big, like, front of a truck was the front of their drum set, with lights flashing and everything, and there's smoke and fire, and it was, what a show, and what a band, and what an album. But again, it was CD era, and I didn't think I'd ever see it on vinyl, but I went looking for it, and there was one available on the internet, and it was from Japan. And honestly, I feel like if you go and order something from the other side of the world, maybe it'll show up, maybe it didn't, maybe it won't, but it did, and I am so happy to have it. It's Foreskin 500's Man Pussy. Ticket to Hell was the song that was the infamous video for it, but all of these songs are incredible. So sleazy, so groovy. I love it. If you like any of that kind of stuff that I mentioned, or if you like Gay Bikers on Acid, or the band that I'm about to talk about, you will love this record. It's electronic, but it's mostly rock and roll, and really sleazy, sinister rock and roll. And I love it, and I am super happy, thanks to the dude in Japan who sold it to me. Now I'm the only guy on the internet with this record on vinyl. So I'm going to do my best to take care of it. Foreskin 500, Man Pussy. And this last one that I want to talk about, very similar in scope. The band is called ChemLab from Chicago, if I remember. And I remember seeing them too in maybe a little earlier, I think 1993 or something, 94. I don't know, somewhere in the mid 90s. And one of the greatest rock and roll shows I ever saw. They called themselves Machine Rock. They are in the industrial genre for the most part. In fact, Stacy and I just saw them. They had a reunion. It's really just Jared, the front dude, and some new dudes. A couple of years ago at Cold Waves in LA. Cold Waves is an industrial, really cool industrial festival that they have in various places. Started in Chicago, and then they have them in LA sometimes, in New York sometimes. We went to the LA one a couple times. And ChemLab put on a fantastic show then too. The first one, when they were young and hungry, was really kind of scary, which is what you want from a rock and roll band. And they called themselves Machine Rock. And I think that out of any of these bands, Thrill Kill Cult or anybody, they were the best at melding, hard rock music with that kind of electronic metallic clang of industrial. I think they were just brilliant at it. But they kind of, fell prey to the same kind of rock and roll garbage as anybody else. So if you ask me, I don't know, 5 years later, the Prodigy showed up. Didn't steal their thunder. They were already falling apart. But the mission was started with ChemLab and then was accomplished by Prodigy, if you ask me. But anyway, they had a great EP before this. They had another great LP after this. But the classic, and it was originally released on Metal Blade, is this one, ChemLab's Burnout at the Hydrogen Bar. Now, very small label, Armalite Distortion Productions, kind of a half and half thing. They put this out. And they put this out, this was announced by Jared from ChemLab somewhere around 2020 that this was going to happen. And everybody clamored that did their pre-orders. I didn't do a pre-order because it was coming from Europe. And I don't know, it'd be like $60 or something, which is just kind of insane. But, I kind of figured, well, maybe at some point they will send some our way in the U.S., and then I'll get it then. And as time went on, people had their pre-orders, and it was a year and a half later, the record never showed up. And I just kind of forgot about it. And I went and looked on the thread on Facebook recently. Some people had mentioned that they had gotten their records finally in 2022. So I looked on Discogs, and Distortion were selling, they had 2 left, I guess. And I was very fortunate to get one of them. It's a gatefold. It's got Jared's very insightful, incisive, and biting lyrics there. And it's on kind of really nice looking splatter. I'm trying not to touch it. Splatter wax. Yeah. Splatter wax. There we go. And man, this is one of the greatest rock and roll records ever made. No joke. It's so good. Every song on it. Codeine, Glue, and You. All of them. It's fantastic, fantastic record. I think there might be one left on Discogs for you to snatch up. But of course the CDs are available, all that kind of stuff. Anyway, so there you go. So there's some new arrivals. I got some more stuff that I'm going to talk about. I'll do that in another video. Thank you for watching. Hope you got something out of it. Any kind of recommendations, I'm all ears to hear them. You can comment. Again, we have a podcast that comes out every week. We talk about all the new releases that are coming out. Well, talk about all the new releases that we think are going to be good coming out. We talk about new additions to our collections. We got rants and raves, all that. There's a link below for you to check that out. Thanks again for listening. I hope to interact with a lot of you out there in the VC community. Okay, thanks, and I'll see you next time. Bye.